Alright, so since I'm working with silicone, stuff's pretty nasty. I don't really want to get it on my hands. It's not as bad as some epoxy, but still got the gloves. I'm going to put them on. Get ready for the smell of vinegar. Good thing we don't have smell-o-vision where you would get the full effect here of the silicone. So the first thing I'm going to do is start with my float valve. This is a Core-Life float valve. It's just a very simple mechanical float valve. It is adjustable, which is nice. By turning this, I can limit the articulation of the float itself. In this particular application, I'm going to go with full float, and you can see that this is actually tapped towards the top. Basically going to sit inside of there like that, so I get as close to the 5 gallons as I can. I'm going to maximize the available volume inside of this container. So the first thing I'm going to do with this, so I've got my little neoprene washer here that sits on there. I don't feel a need to silicone this because I think the pressure in the washer will do just fine in terms of keeping it leak free. And plus, technically, if this should the water level go above this float and continue to go for whatever reason, that's the only thing that would make this leak, and the chances of that happening are next to none. So one of the things that you'll want to do with your container, and you'll figure this out pretty quick, is when you're using a powerful keyhole saw to rip this hole, you're going to cause a mess. There will be tiny little shards of plastic on everything. So I took a good couple minutes to wipe it all out, get all the plastic out. Then I put tap water in there and shook it vigorously, and then I kind of dried the parts that are important to be dried. So, simple as dropping it in, lining it up with a hole. It's important that you don't want this to be kind of off center. You want it to be as as vertical as possible, so it doesn't interfere with the full range of motion that comes with the float valve and the hinge. So the next step then is I'm going to take the next neoprene washer, and I've got a little bit of a gap around there. So this I think I will silicone before I put the washer on. So again, we've got the ubiquitous Loctite clear silicone. I've used tons of this stuff in this project, from Click to Clunk. Even though I cleaned it out, it looks like it's going to be a little difficult. So what we'll do then, no worries, it's where I got gloves on, right? Pop this off. A little dab will do ya. Maybe a little more. And then I'm going to set this in. Now I basically just really want to get down here. Don't want to get a whole lot of these threads. And I'll probably waste more than I need, but I never said I wasn't sloppy. Alright. So that's probably good. Now what I'll do, just to be careful, this is in place here, I'll go ahead and try to remove some of the excess silicone. And that will work. And I can take my washer, put that into place. Yep, right in the sticky. That's where we want it. Alright, and then I can take my lock nut, cinch that down. These things pretty much finger tight, I think would be okay. I may just give it a little bit of a crank with my my pliers, just to make sure I got a good tight seal. Because this can be a little tricky, and maybe you've done this before already, and you're like, well, I know what he's doing there. I use an Instant Ocean bucket or something like that. That's fine. As you notice, if it's a bucket or anything that's cylindrical, obviously it has the shape, and the bulkheads really are designed to work with a flat surface, and this is a little convex or concave. It's round, you know what I mean. So, in theory, we should be okay, though, with the addition of the silicone and just making sure that we're tight here. Now, again, I want to be careful not to get too tight, but I really want to make sure that some of the silicone oozes out, and that's what it's doing here. Yeah, and as I look around, I seem to have a pretty good seal. I'll just do one little quarter turn to make sure, and then I can just kind of feather this out. And I'm pretty confident that that is going to be a good seal. Now if I look, my actuator looks pretty straight. I think we've got ourselves a float. Now obviously you really want the silicone to set for a while before you get it wet. That's very important. Alright, the next step then, similar. Now this is a little different because as awesome as these are, they don't come with washers. So getting, you know, copious amounts of silicone will be important because they don't have a washer to sit on. And we're taking our chances because we're not using a completely flat surface to mount them to. Again, that's where the silicone comes in. It sort of compensates for your margin of error. So I'll slap some of that on there. Again, I don't really want a lot on the threads. No need to complicate this, right? So I'll just kind of put it in there and push. And that's what I expected to see. I want it to kind of ooze out, and then I'll fan it around. So then I'll take my lock nut. And again, you want this hole, it can be any size, as long as you can get your hand in there, in your arm. I'm going to hold it steady with my thumb and just begin the process. And, you know, I'll check in there, and it looks like I've got some pretty good silicone has kind of come through the other side, which is good. And I'll just spin the nut until it seats right inside of that. Now this part's a little tricky. I don't really want to use the channel locks. So I'm going to get this as tight as I can with my hands. And then I'll simply just kind of feather it around, making sure it gets in there. And I'll give you a little trick. You know, I built this tank, this whole system, and I had to do 4 different leak tests because I couldn't get it right. Even though I glued it and I measured it right, I still did something wrong. So instead of tearing it all apart down there at my return, I cheated a little bit and slathered it in silicone after it had dried. And 4th time was a charm, because when I filled it up with water for the 5th time, I had no leaks. So obviously that's kind of a short-term cheat fix, but I'm okay with that because I'll come back later and you know, if I go switch out the pump or something, redo it. So for these, obviously I want to kind of monitor them as well and make sure that I don't get any leaks. So I've got my hole here in the bottom, and I have my hole here for the 2nd chamber, which is going to attach it to the 1st. So it's really pretty simple. Just repeat the process. Now what I've done differently here is I have, I'm going to put this one in the bottom. Nope, check that. That one goes on the side. This one goes in the bottom. Now what you notice is the placement of the hole. And basically this bulkhead is going to tie to this bulkhead. And I've left area in the bottom so that if I dose with Kalkwasser and I kind of stir it up a little bit, the Kalkwasser will settle, and the only water that's going to pour out of this container into this container will keep all the Kalkwasser in the bottom, and the clear supernet, the top water that doesn't have you know, thick amounts of the Kalkwasser, will settle. And I can simply disconnect my line and clean it as I need to. So I'm going to repeat the same process here. Just slather the silicone all the way around. And it's okay to get a little excess on there because, you know, you're going to feather it out anyway, right? Alright, have my lock nut ready. And simply plug it in. Tighten it up. Okay. Fan it around. Now this one I'm going to do a little differently because I noticed that the hole, you know, the bit slipped just a little bit, and it made this hole just a little more jagged than I'm comfortable with. So I think what I'm going to do, just to be safe, is I'll put a little dollop on here. As Rick says, a smidgen. Rick helped me build this thing because he has master carpenter skills that I don't have, and he said just a smidgen of everything. So I'm going to slather some on the inside. This is probably hard to see, but I think you understand what I'm doing. Just slathering it around where the lock nut meets the container itself, just to be safe, and make sure that should this bump a little bit, that the silicone has enough give that it will keep it plugged and not leak on me. Now for the bottom. I'm sorry, did that wrong again. This one's actually the bottom, so I'll take my little piece out here. Maybe. Alright, now for the bottom. Same thing applies. Good thing we only had, what, like 3 of these? Okay, definitely want the bottom to be tight. Really, I don't want leaks anywhere. Heat leaks. Makes you feel like such a failure. Good thing I'm not a plumber. Alright, so plumber by hobby, not by trade. And we'll just stick it in there. This one I got lucky because I kind of hit it right in the flattest spot. So, you know, if any of these I would expect to not have a problem, it would be this one. But we'll see. So again, tighten it up really tight. Now it still has a little bit of play in it just because, get that really tight. Again, the bit. So I think if I would have done this differently, maybe what I would have done is not really have drilled the pilot hole. I probably would have just went, well, maybe I would have drilled the pilot hole but with a tinier bit, not a big pilot hole. That's what really messed me up. So I'll just put a little extra finger dabble around in. Come back out here and just make sure that this is nice and thick. And I don't really even care if this one's sloppy because that might just make it easier. Alright, there you go. It's really that simple. Whip the whole thing out in just a couple of minutes basically. So I just want to line this up with where my hole was the first time or the last time. Boom, sits right there. Lines up perfectly. And as you can see through there, there's my 2 bulkheads. So I'll just put a little line like we have here, just a tiny little piece. We'll put that in there, and then we'll hook up our supply line to our float, and we'll be done. So I think what we're going to do is let this set up. We'll come back a couple hours or whatever, hook it all up, put water in it, and then do the rest and tie it into the sump. So that's it.